I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit. This field season will be my 50th, so hopefully I'm not starting to jinx myself. But I look at these pictures and I like to point out that I'm twice the man I used to be. But okay, actually, this talk has changed many times. I thought I was going to show you all these beautiful pictures I've taken over the years, and especially in the Badlands, and then working. This is me out on Rainy Buttes leveling. But one of the first things I did is I went back. I've spoken to the society 14 times over the years, and Milton Roger, I think you've seen every single one. But I think, but and I'm missing a few. So but back, especially when you're using slides, it was hard to keep track of things. Anyway, people ask me why am I in geology? My dad was a geologist. He was on a rig down in southern Illinois, where he actually was from Buffalo, New York, went through the University of Buffalo, and then got a job. His first job was working the Illinois Basin, drilling for the Ovas sandstone, which is Mississippian, at 1,500 to 3,000 feet. So he said when he first came up to North Dakota in 57, 58, that going down 6,000 feet up in Burke County was quite the change. I like being outside. That's the other part of it. And I've been lucky enough to have a job where I've been outside quite a bit. And then when I went up to UND, I thought, okay, that solved if I was doing the right thing or not, because I had fantastic professors. And what's interesting is the professor that's not in there was Walt Moore, which probably makes more sense to have this picture of him on a field trip that he would run every spring through the 60s and 70s, and just a fantastic field geologist. This Wes Norton, I told that story many times, where my dad ran into Wes Norton, who ran the Bismarck office here, the survey, at the Plaza Beer Depot. I wasn't sure my dad was going in or if he was coming out, so I change every once in a while how that goes. But Wes said, "Hey, does your boy need a job?" And my dad said, "Yeah, he's looking, scrubbing toilets," which I was. So I was looking for a change. Anyway, Wes sent me out in the first couple of days because I was checking coal exploration holes, which then I ended up doing for decades, and then Ned took that over, and now we're using through oil and gas division, and doing a lot of those. Ned, I think, still does once in a while. Anyway, funny thing about this, the two people on the far right are USGS geologists, Mike Mingy and Sue Cook, and then me, and then Lauren Jacobson, who everyone out in Slope County knows as Shaky Jake, two grad students, and then Lauren just spaced his name out. Oh, that'll do. Anyway, in just recent years, Shaky and Lauren, I've got to know again through our critical minerals project down there. Anyway, and I've said this. First thing I did, I was out checking coal exploration holes, so I was in 19 different counties, 19, 20 counties across western North Dakota. So I took the survey publications with me and kind of learned as I went. Started off with that Plymouth Fury in the upper left, and then went over on the right to that Dodge two-wheel drive with chains. And of course, the memories with chains is you get on a really muddy road, and the first thing you do is throw at least one chain and got to get up. It's nothing worse than putting chains on when they're muddy, the tire's muddy. Then I got to on that lower left to a Chevy 3/4 ton four-wheel drive. All the one thing across all these vehicles is mud. And then we went to full size Blazers, and then the S10 is shown there. The one constant with those damn Blazers is the dust that would just come in the back. Nels Forsman, professor up at UND, took a cloth sample bag, cut it open so he could try to make his own mask. But one of the first projects I had, actually before I was even hired full-time, when I was a temp, was looking at oil field waste and focused on reserve pits. And this was typical. This was something that was not really looked at. I ended up looked at 4 different sites, and it was the first on-site characterization of drilling mud in the country. So the American Petroleum Institute was contacting me all the time to find out how that was going. You can see that those reserve pits are lined, but unfortunately, when they were done using them, in fact, this is a lined pit. You can see a little bit of liner up along the crown, but they would often trench, and that's what they were in the process of doing, but they ran out of space over the side of the hill, then they were into a ravine. And so they stopped there, and I don't know if they stopped because I showed up and told them what I was doing, and they decided they had to do something else, or if they just waited till I left and finished it. But one of the first things that I pointed out was you've got all this mud in a lined pit trying to keep the fluid contained. And when you go to reclamation, you're digging all these trenches, and anywhere from 40 to probably 80% of the mud ended up in those unlined trenches. Often the depth of that pit was 10 feet. The trenches could go down to 21 feet. And you might have a nice claystone, mudstone at the top where you dug the pit. And you could have sandstone or lignite beneath it. We used lysimeters and the soil water samplers. You can see the silica dust. We used this for years. We'd be white with silica dust before our tech, Dave Lechner, read the bag and said, "Holy cow, there's all these warnings about silicosis." And it was just like the consistency of flour. And of course, you're out in the field. Here's one where you've got a hollow stem auger. We'd set our pipe through that. And often, if you were in sand or gravel, it would catch up in the inside, so the pipe would rise as you were tripping out of the hole. So we devised where somebody would just sit right on the pipe and hold it down. This was, I think, pre-OSHA anyway, but we did make the person wear a hard hat. Also, then any instrumentation we would do, we always plane table alidate. That was really the quickest way for us. So for 10, 15 years, I would borrow it from the UND Civil Engineering Department. Monty Phillips up there was always amazed that anybody was still using this technology. He said, well, we still teach a little bit, but we didn't think anybody used it. Also, we weren't set up like the health department. So the health department, when I refer to the health department today, it's the DEQ or Department of Environmental Quality. Same with the Water Commission. Water Resources, I can remember that. I still say Water Commission. But anyway, we weren't set up for water sampling. We didn't have a nice van like Health Department did, although we did borrow theirs a couple times. So often we were just off a tailgate. Nothing like trying to filter a sample when it's freezing right on the filter paper. Also, earth resistivity, we use that quite a bit on these sites because we were dealing with salt-based, salt-saturated drilling muds. So the salt content was high. This is, so the 4 sites I looked at, 2 of them were in vulnerable areas, and this is one of them on the south shore of Lake Sakakawea. And the other, you'll see in a second, was on the floodplain of Little Missouri River. And the other 2 were in Badlands where the water table was really low, close to 100 feet, high clay content. So at this site, again, we put in monitor wells or piezometers, and then I came around here in November of '81 and was taking slug tests into the evening. And of course, on my very last well, the slug got stuck at about 8 feet or so. And so I ran up to, this is again, the south, the Charleston area, so that I was at that, what the picture you just saw was a Charleston, Madison North unit. I had to run to the Texaco pipe yard to get a piece of sucker rod or some piece of pipe that would help me because I had to jam that down the well to loosen the slugs. I knew I got it down there. I knew if I pulled it really hard, I'd be able to dislodge it. So I went to the pipe yard. It's probably 7 at night, and I go through and I find a section, I can't remember, it was 10 or 15 feet or so. I think their standard is 25, but I grab that and I start to go back to get in there. Had to go over barbed wire, three stem fence, and all of a sudden I hear, and I look and I see a Rottweiler coming at me, or it could have been a fat Doberman. I didn't take a lot of time to look at it, but I'm running with this piece of pipe, and I'm thinking, okay, I can maybe fend them off, or hey, in junior high, I was a hurdler in junior high and high school. My first thought was to drop it and hurdle a fence, but if you don't make it over there, it's not good. So I decided that what I would do is I'd use that and I would pole vault because I took pole vault for one day in junior high, and so I'm running and I'm getting my hands right, and I remember get your hands right and plant, and that was the two things. And sure enough, I planted. It's probably like 1 in a million, but I just went. Of course, there's no bend on this. I just went right over the top, went over, crashed into the ditch, and I knew the dog would be right on me because he'd just go right through. But thank God he was trained. He stopped right there. So I had to wait till he got bored, and then I went back and picked up the piece of pipe. And sure enough, it worked perfectly. I tapped on it, got loose. I was able to pull it up, drove back, and then I just threw the piece of pipe right in front of the gate. I thought, I'm not going back in there. This is actually, Chris was able to generate. Otherwise, you're going to see this. This is what I came up with. So, okay, Apache Federal. This is the site that was pretty controversial. I didn't realize it until I got into it because it's on the floodplain of the Little Missouri, 2,000 feet from the front of Teddy Roosevelt's Elkhorn Ranch site, and only 600 or 700 feet to the boundary. So I picked that site. West Norton didn't want me looking at it. The Bureau of Land Management people didn't want me looking at it. U.S. Forest Service. Turns out, in retrospect, they were sorry that they had permitted it so closely to that site. And so 1980, instrumented had, and I came up in the spring of 81 to sample all my wells, and here's a drilling rig sitting on there. They destroyed most of my wells and re-deepened the well to the Bakken. And so then I start contacting everybody, and they're like, oh, geez, somebody's supposed to contact you and let you know. Well, I suppose you're going to go somewhere else now. I said, hell no, I'm coming right back in. So we came back in and instrumented the site. Brett Foss and I were just talking about this the other day. That's Brett with the cut off sleeves on his T-shirt, the driller there, along with Dan Pyle. So we came back in as soon as the rig moved off, put the wells back in. So then we had two reserve pits, and of course all the trenching where the mud was, and so the chloride levels, if you know the background in Western North Dakota, is generally less than 25 milligrams per liter. You can see some of the numbers that jumped up, and of course you've got 120, 140,000 milligrams per liter of chloride in the saturated mud. So this was unusual. We instrumented in 80, 81, came back in 85, 86, and then in 2014, up on the upper left, on the left side, Mark McDonald, and then the right, Tim Nesheim came and helped me. Forest Service said, hey, you got to get these wells out of there. It's been too long. So we wanted to sample one more time. And so if you look, I just put this in for chloride and then for chromium, and you can see you can, again, you're above the water table, so it depends on recharge for leachate getting down. And see more numbers. I always tell people I was the first Aaron Brockovich checking hexavalent chromium. That's what I was after. And because it's used at least at that time, as a drilling mud additive, and that's what API was really concerned about. They kept saying, we really need that because that extends the life of the drill string. Otherwise, it really gets attacked by H2S. So, and then here's the profiles. Real quick story. I gave it presentation in '86 in Great Falls, Montana, Rocky Mountain section, Rocky Mountain Groundwater Conference. Professor right in front of me from either Montana or Montana State, I've forgotten, got up, spent his whole time bashing my report. And then they had me come up behind. There's 700 people in the audience. And so I came up and I just said, and I showed things like this. And I just said, well, obviously, and I picked up his name from this talk. I said, well, Professor certainly understands the theory and all much better than I do. And all I can say is that this worked. That was kind of my presentation. And then I got the biggest hand in my life from that. And as I'm walking down the aisle, guy leaned over, you really showed that prick. I'm like, okay, well, anyway. And here's another AI generated, but senior at Bismarck High School in 1979, and there was a lot of talk. There was things going on in the legislature for reclamation of mine lands, and one of the talks must have also been about reclaiming old spoils. But I just remember this bulldozer going through these spruce trees, knocking them over, and MDU, it was Metropolis, was narrating, saying, this is what the state's going to make us do. And of course, I knew it was the Custer mine, which is really the nicest and most vegetated of all the spoils I've seen, because the Boy Scouts got in there and planted trees all through it. Plus, there's not a really high clay content. And that's what really kills these spoils. If you got really high clay content, it's hard for vegetation to get established. Anyway, so I'm like, damn, that's a lot of propaganda there. So funny enough, here 7 years later, I'm working on a project for the PSC to determine whether or not all the spoils in North Dakota should be leveled and reclaimed. And so we looked at, and Jerry Growald was the main person on this project, but looked at 52 spoil areas around the state, the western part of the state, picked 4, and these were the 4 mines. And then we went in and we were concentrating, we were looking at, okay, what's the salt content, primarily sodium sulfate, and between the what we call the top, the ridges, and then the V's between them. So here we've got the survey's hollow stem auger again. This one now is the Ford solid stem, which was the other one was an 8-inch. This one is 4 3/4. And then we actually got up and we were hand augering at the tops of these spoils to put in lysimeters. And then we had also a rotary rig. So overall, of those 4 sites, we had 63 monitoring wells, 48 lysimeters. And what we saw, not too surprising, was that there had been some flushing of the salt between the V's where water had run off of the sides of the slopes. And we estimated there would be an impact just by leveling these out. You would get more infiltration in some of these areas. But at the end of the day, there was no soil that was saved. And that, do I need to do anything when it
should give it like 10 seconds.
Okay. But anyway, since the soil wasn't saved, there really wasn't much that could be done. And so that was the conclusion of the project. Tell a quick one here. So at the Davenport mine, that if you remember that solid stem auger, which was from '64, had a Ford industrial engine on it, and Dave Lechner and I were augering through in the fall of I think '82, and the engine started running rough, and so I was tapping the sediment bowl on the gasoline. And my hand slipped into the fan, and that big industrial engine, the fans had fins on them, which is even worse. But luckily, it just threw my hand out instead of taking me down with it, and it was really a dangerous thing. And my gloves, I had those Cenex orange gloves, those rubber gloves, and I had a cloth liner inside, and I could feel, actually it was my left hand, I could feel the finger, I could feel that filling up with blood. So I very gingerly pulled that glove off, and then my liner was soaked with blood, and I thought, is my finger there or not? Turns out it had split the nail right in half, but which just, of course, bled quite a bit. We go to Davenport, there's nothing, or I mean, New Leipzig, nothing there. So then we go to Elgin, to the hospital, and we walk in, and my hand is throbbing, but I've got it down, and I had a towel wrapped around, but it's bleeding all over. So we go down to find this hallway, and then find the emergency room and go in there, and like I said, I drip blood all the way through, and then I hear somebody running, and it's a nurse following the blood trail, and she comes in. And at this point, I'm like this, and I got this wrap, and she's like, "Oh my God!" And I showed her, and she's like, "Whoa," she was expecting something really bad. She said, "There's no doctors here. You got to go to the clinic in Mott." So I go to the clinic in Mott, and he looks at it, and he said, "Yeah, I got to stitch that up. We just got to take the rest of your nail off." And so he grabs this needle nose plier and grabs it, pulls, nothing happens except some severe pain. Nothing comes off. So then he stands up and he has me put my full weight on, and he jerks as hard as he can. Again, nothing, except tears are shooting out. I mean, I'm like, damn, doc, that didn't feel too good. So then he goes, we're just going to wrap it. And that was it. So every one of these, I kind of picked things where I had stories, goofy stories. And then we came back and did, Willie Beal did part of his thesis, 2 more reserve pits up north. And then we focused also on a brine pond. And it turns out brine ponds, which have been outlawed since well, in '84 we closed the last one, but they were pretty much ended in the '70s. But still a major problem today. I think just to save a little time, I'll just point. And here's 2 brine ponds there at the one site that we looked at, and then we were working in conjunction with NDSU. John Foss was head of the soils department at the time, and Bob Kubhart, head of their chemistry. John Foss actually flew through this area and flew color and then infrared. And so you can see the vegetation where in some places there was still grain that was growing, but you could really pick it up on infrared how stressed it was. And then he flew over this area. This is in the Wiley field up in Botno, and Stratton. You can see on this infrared around that area how not only are you seeing the stress of the vegetation around there, but if you go to the east, to the right, you can see where runoff has taken that, and all the way down that ditch in the southeast corner, you can see where vegetation is stressed, and then at the other couple sites that I circled. So, and they saw just from '79 to '85, they saw a huge increase in the area that was being stressed. We put in 38 piezometers through that area, or 28, and then a lot of sampling, and found that, again, very high concentrations of salt, and especially in the upper 40 feet. And then we were saying, well, you could try this, but that's not going to work, or try this and that. And then we point out infiltration gallery, which in later years was used, and the success, I think, was pretty mixed, because you've got this tight till, and so you're dependent on the fractures for water moving through it. And you may recall Scott Coram, when he was working with Bar Engineering, talked to the society about basically just scooping up all the contaminated material that they could get to, throwing it into a big giant baggie, and then putting in calcium chloride and trying to get the sodium out of there. So I was going to talk to Cody yesterday or today to ask his thoughts on this. And I thought, let's just wait and have Cody give a talk. He could say where things are at. So we put this paper out in '85, and basically warning, hey, if we don't do something, the problem's just going to get worse, because the salt's just going to continue to move out laterally. And it got some attention, and just like the reserve pit stuff, it did lead to changes in the procedures, and of course now they use closed. I mean, we've learned a lot of things over the years, but luckily I've got Fenton Dooley is out there promoting our 85 paper, so I wish I had copyrighted that damn thing. But here's the 84. I think this is, my memory serves me right. This is uh, just a few miles before you drop down, this south of Williston, before you drop down on the bridge, and on the east side of the highway 85. I think this is where the last injection well was that was using ponds. That in 84 we went in, ran resistivity, and then shut that down. Wes Norton came to me and said, "We're going to shut this damn thing down. So, and we need you to go out there. Just," he said, "just push some dirt around and then come back and tell me we can get rid of it." So that's pretty much what we did. This was a weird project we did in association. The health department asked us. They had a abandoned shot hole. This is January of '83 that flowed uh, sodium chloride 119,000, and there was half mile away in the Black Slough field there was a injection well, and they couldn't get this site plugged until they shut down the injection well. So they knew there was a direct connection. So we came up 18 months later, July of '84, and we drilled put wells all over the place. So the injection well, if you look at the maps on there, on the one in the middle, 15 in section 15, but in the middle, almost well in the northwest quarter is the where the injection well was. So we went all the way around it, and here we had over 30 injection wells. I mean monitoring wells, and in doing it, we were covered with salt just from the cuttings coming up. So we thought this was going to be one of the most straightforward projects we've done so far. And instead, when we got the analysis back, it was sodium sulfate. It wasn't sodium chloride at all. And so this went from the most straightforward to now still don't know what was going on up there. We had several alternatives. And again, we knew that two things, the shot hole flowed, and then the Amundsen farm to the north, that their water flowed, their well flowed, but it flowed fresh water, which I'm like, well, yeah, it's just pushing that, if enough time would have gone by, that would have flowed, but we could not find the salt water. What we did, this is a pretty crappy picture. This is south of the Amundsens. You can see we blew gas out of that well for 4 or 5 days. And again, we were thinking this was gas, probably associated gas that from the injection well that was getting pushed through. And then later started thinking, because this was through a coal at 90 feet, we thought maybe that's coal bed methane that got focused and pushed forward. We didn't get an analysis on it, and we wanted to throw a match on it, but we were a little nervous, so we didn't do that. So, got to tell a quick story about Gary Amundsen, who was great to us. He was a really nice guy, but everyone called him crazy Gary out in Lignite. Black Sioux, we were just a couple miles south west of Lignite. But Gary said, we were out at Grand Forks at the time, and Gary said, "Hey, anytime you want, just leave your vehicles, and you can put it in one of our outbuildings, as you can see there to the west." So it was Friday afternoon. I went over and knocked on the door. Nobody answered, but I thought I could feel the curtain moving a little bit. And so I went over to the outbuildings. First tried the one on the right, and then the door was locked. And then I went around to the backside with Dave Lechner, and that was locked. Came around. Dave went to the other building. I walked around the front where that X is. I turned, and Gary had a 30-06 level at my head. And I said, "Gary, it's Ed, man, it's Ed." And took him quite a while to drop, because you're counting the milliseconds. And he said, "Oh, I thought you were the deputy sheriff breaking into my building." So I'm like, all the way back to Grand Forks, I'm talking with Dave going, "That's crazy, Gary." So that winter is probably in February. I'm reading the Grand Forks Herald. There's a little nubs in the news. Burke County Deputy Sheriff arrested for breaking into buildings. So I'm like, Gary knew what he was talking about. Just had the wrong guy. Okay, talk a little bit about coal. I was going back and forth. You see the emphasis on a lot of environmental projects. I was hired as a coal geologist in 1980 when I went full time. And here's where we've got a lot of really good control on data. A lot of that has come from oil wells where they ran gamma through casing, would have preferred open hole, but still. So one of the first days, my job in 1980 is I grabbed we had file cabinets full of coal logs, of a lot of those that I had checked as a temp for proper plugging. So I took an area, this actually is down by Gascoigne, where I had really good control actually every half mile. But here I only had it 6 miles. I said, I'm just going to take 6 miles, which is the typical spacing, typical control throughout Western North Dakota. And at that time, and I'll say, okay, and I'm sure you'd see, okay, you got top three coals shown there in black. You probably trace those across. Then you got another set of three, trace those. And then the ones on the very bottom on the right, they just didn't drill deep enough on that hole. And then I went back and I put in that control that you can see to the right. And you can see actually that second set of coals actually correlates with that set of coals at the very bottom. And I said, the heck with this, because I'm going to be wasting my time because there's not enough data there to be able to correlate that. So then I put this together for something else. This is the commissions that I've testified in front of and or given reports to at their monthly meetings, starting with up in the upper left, all Democrats. And then in the middle, Ed Schaefer comes in, he's the only Republican. And it went like that through until 2000 when John Hoeven was elected. And then Roger Johnson, the Ag Commission, was the only Democrat. And then since 2009, it's been all Republicans. But anyway, I was at an industrial commission meeting in 2000, and Governor Hoeven started talking about the Vision 21. Well, Vision 21, the state was going to give coal companies or utility company $10 million to open a new coal mine or a new power plant. And I'm sitting in the crowd going, oh, damn, I should have done this 20 years ago. So I had to get moving. Well, luckily, we hired Gerard Govan, who's Gerard, I think I'll have you stand up and say if you know. But we hired Gerard back in 1996 and started putting this data together, entering it into a fantastic software program called Stratifact, DOS-based. And then Ned picked up the slack after that. But I had that data to work with, and Gerard and I, and then Gerard and I and Ned had put together some coal correlations for focusing on coal bed methane. But I was like, okay, I got to get this thing out. And 2000 to 2001, 1,600 hours spent, generated 620 of these maps. And so you can see here's on the left is my office copy, and then the final copy, and you got a red line. I finished these all in 2001. It took our GIS division till 2008 to get that map out, and they were so swamped with these. But I was able to write in 2001 to generate all these county maps, and what I did is I took my quad maps and Xerox reduced them 50%, took that copy, another 50%, and then another 20 or whatever. I ended up with this distorted piece of crap, but then I taped them all together and into a county, and then we gave it to our soils digitizers who knew exactly they'd been doing that as a job, how to refocus, get a square section, and then so they were able to get these maps out. And then and this is what's so unusual about when you put out maps reports, you don't know if things ever get used. In 2001, I'm at an industrial commission meeting again in the audience. I'm going to be presenting, and Bar Engineering is there, and I think probably representing Great Northern Properties, but they're after this Vision 21 money and they're showing a map, and I wasn't really paying attention. And then Carlene got my attention, and she lifted up the corner. I could see it was my map. So they had drawn right on my map, and I thought, okay, was glad I did that. And then we went out and put out, when you hear that we've got North Dakota's got 800 years of coal, that comes from this work that was put together, 25 billion tons. And this is not just Gerard and Ned, but Quentin Vandal, Michelle Gutenkoots, Kim Jacobs, who we were just talking about. Her husband was killed right there on the corner at the Water Commission on State Street, and in 2010. And so there was in a motorcycle, and so there were flowers there for years, and I've lost track of Kim, where Kim's at, but anyway, their little kids now are in high school or graduating or in college. But and then we also took the data and said, okay, there's 1.3 trillion tons total of coal in North Dakota, where as Brandt in the 50s was thinking more like 250 billion. So a lot more coal than what people were thinking about before. Now we also do infrastructure reviews. Fred Anderson's done a lot of those in recent years, and but I was helping out back at this time. And one of the things I did is Great Northern. Then probably the Vision 21 thing just kept moving slowly along, but they got serious about trying to move forward in the South Heart area where there is a lot of coal. And so I looked, I said, well, there's also uranium in that area. And so I generated an area for them, got it to them, and I thought, I might as well, I've done part of a map, why don't I just do this whole area? So it's hard to see at this scale, but everything that's red dot has got a radioactive kick on the gamma log. And I quantified that. And then I said, well, I've done that. Why don't I also take the groundwater? And Cooper Land, this is from the Bauer and Land Company, had a big push. You could see between October 75, June of 78. And Cooper spent a lot of time telling me about this project, but because I was very interested. And but he hired a couple school teachers, retired school teachers, ex-postmaster, retired postmaster, I think, down in Bowman. So they knew almost everybody. These guys went out and asking for samples, both from domestic and livestock and wells. And they got like 90-some% of the people said yes. You go out there today, you'd probably be flipped around maybe 10%, I don't know. But so we had this fantastic database, groundwater chemistry, 3,500 samples. And so several different stories with this, but so he put all this together, and he also took a scintillometer, taped it to his bumper, drove every section trail in 5, 6, 7 counties, and then put a map together based on that plus the water. So they were out to selling this, and I think they may have sold this. It may have been the fall of 78, and I think it was then and not early 79, but he said they had a wine and cheese party up on top of Chalky Buttes, and they sold it to this company. And he said they were leery. They were trying to figure out who this company was because they were all a bunch of French people. And so once they sold it up there, they had the signed the contract and everything. Then one of the fellows that he'd been pestering to find out who it was handed him his business card, and he worked for the French government. It was their Atomic Energy Commission equivalent. They were looking for uranium for France. And he said he was glad he didn't quarrel about the money. He said he thought they made pretty good money off this, but just a matter of months later with 3 Mile Island and the movie China Syndrome, that almost went to zero, the value. And that killed the uranium. It wasn't until 2010 that we had another company looking for uranium in North Dakota. Prior to that, if you look at this map, you can pick out some of the areas that they were drilling. Anyway, I thought Cooper would appreciate being it. Oh, the first thing I did, so Cooper said, I'm giving this to the state because it's really not, this was in the 90s. This isn't, or maybe early 2000s. It's no longer an economic, it's more of a health concern. And so I made a copy and turned it over to the health department. And in 2008, we did in situ uranium mining rules. We went right to Belfield, had 125 pissed off people show up because they had lived in this area since 67 when the uranium companies deserted the state because the federal government changed how they did allotments. Before you had to get an allotment from the government to mine uranium. And so the federal government spread this out all over the West because they didn't want it concentrated. And then by 67, they said, to save, make it more economic, let's let them, we'll just stop that process and they can go wherever they want. So these companies all went to Colorado, New Mexico, and such. Okay, got a few more minutes. One of the projects I started again in the 80s was mapping Dunn County. And I had mapped, before this, I'd mapped maybe about 5 acres, part of my senior thesis on a landslide. This was 1.3 million acres, so it was a bit of a leap. And here's an example, just an example of one of my field maps on the Kildare Mountains. But what's funny is very early on, probably when I was still a temp, I read C.J. Hare's report on the Marmarth lignite field, southwestern North Dakota. He did his field work 1911, 1912, and then here 17 years later, he publishes it. And I'm like, what? That makes no sense. What the hell happened? Well, a couple of years ago, I found out reading his obituary that Chuck went to work for an oil company, 1917. So that explains a lot of it. I have a harder time explaining mine. I started Dunn County really in 80, but I didn't do as much, 83, 85. And then we augured a bunch of holes in 86. So that's 18 years. So I thought, yeah, I need to not be so upset with people. Senzoic project. This is a project that was over $1 million. Lee Gerhard and Kelly Carlson had this. They were going to identify the problem areas for coal mining. This was coming from the Office of Surface Mining, $1 million in 1980, which is a lot of money back then, still is. But then Gerhard left. Kelly transferred to the survey. It went to Rich Lefevre and I, and it dropped to 100,000. And but one of the things, again, to identify problem areas for coal mining in the Powder and Williston Basin. And so I ended up drilling at a drilling project, and this was that. This is a 1,200-foot hole. Take a look at the water truck. Look at how damn small that thing is, which, of course, this was the first big project I'd done, so I didn't know. But I found out pretty quickly because I took this picture one day because you can see the driller on the left, the helper on the right. Well, the helper was always gone to get water. So it was Gary Stefanowski and I were running the pipe in and out. We learned a lot that and then even when he got a bigger truck, he was gone a lot. So anyway, one of the things, and there's Gary there on the left. One of the things, when you got so much cuttings, one of the first things you figure out, you're never going to get everything back in the hole. That just doesn't work. And so we were trying to devise ways of spreading the cuttings, and this was a failed attempt. We were about an inch off. The springs were about an inch off the axle. We could barely move, and then we hit every damn badger hole out in that prairie as we were trying to spin to throw the cuttings. And the cuttings did not want to leave they set up pretty quickly. Got a couple pictures out of that. Real quickly, so I actually started as a coal geologist, but I did a lot of environmental work to the point where I changed my title to environmental geologist. Took that over from Hoganson, who then changed his to paleontologist. But we did a lot of things for the health department because they were short-staffed. And here we are, Dave Lotz there on the left and Dean Mose on the right, who then went to the PSC. Got a call, and this is 87. A furniture dealer on Main Street in Bottineau had fumes in his basement that exceeded the flash point. And so we got up there and started going up and down. And the gas station, which was the obvious source, was like, no problem. We got no problems. we're not missing anything. So we started drilling everywhere else. And every old timer who was about my age now probably would come by and there used to be a gas station here. There used to be a gas station there. So we were all over the place and we drill in and it was like kerosene. I mean, we would get a product, but it just seemed like it was old. And, you think about that. I think about that here in Bismarck, how many gas stations on Main Street have come and gone. So it'd be a similar thing here. We finally found it up the street there. You can see the gas station. When we finally drilled there, we had gasoline all over the place. So I don't know who was keeping their records. Then we jumped up to lignite. They had benzene in their water supply. And so they were quite concerned. And so there were, again, the same situation. We had a bulk dealer, Rodney Olson, and for Amoco, and that's his operation there on the left. So again, we're drilling all over. Everything pointed back to Rodney, but he's not missing. No, no leaking. Rick Nelson is there in the blue, if you ever had dealings with Rick. So we finally had him pull the tank, and he says, perfect, looks great. And then Rick grabbed a steel brush, and you can see the holes that he came up with. And then it turns out, well, Rodney was suing Amoco for shorting him, but he didn't think that had anything to do with a leaking tank. And then they put in a weir and ran the water through there. I'll do a quick one. I want to talk about, because I had the opportunity to work with Steve Pusk on this project. And so this is Seward Lagoon up at Devil's Lake. And the representative was none other but Gordon Berg. And Gordon Berg was really a character. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife once was giving he had been invited by Gordon Berg. He's at a podium like this. He's talking about ducks and everything and Devil's Lake. And he said something that Gordon didn't like. So Gordon just got up out of the crowd and nudged him off, said, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So we'll get hold on to the next guy. Yeah, but that was Gordon Berg. So he wanted us to come up. He was concerned that the lagoon water was getting into the Spiritwood. And so that's what we went up and agreed to do that. And in the background there, you can see the Water Commission's rotary rig, and then we're augering here. And then it was John Bloomley and Steve Pusk. And so Bloomley is interviewed by the press, and I'm kind of listening. I hadn't had much interaction with the press. And he's getting all these softball things, all these, everything's great. And then I'm getting ready to leave. And then the reporter brings me over. Very first question, he asked me, do you guys always jump when you get a representative asking you to come up and do a project? So he waited for me to drop that on. And I just said, well, the concern is coming from his constituents, and that's, what he brought through. And I'm pretty sure that didn't make it onto the news because that's not what he wanted to hear. But what we found, there actually was a kind of a limb of the Spiritwood coming off there, near there, but that the green is till, there's a thick layer of till, and we didn't see anything making it into the Spiritwood. But that's the first time I saw the Spiritwood in that area, and of course it's developed in the pier, but the gravel, and you would see, if you didn't read into the driller's logs or things, but you had all this gravel, but it was of pure shale. And so it was very interesting for me to see that. Okay, now this is the last thing. I'll just talk quickly about this summer. And this is where we had a very important person that came to our fossil dig. And so Clint had gotten a call on a Friday, I believe, and the 4th of July was Thursday, I think. And so he kept it quiet, even from me, for several days. But so he said, well, I said, we're going to need to go out there, obviously. And they had just closed the site up a week before and, covered it back over so it'd be good. This is out of Medora. And then actually I have it documented. I forget if it was 2:00, but Clint had me the phone. It had just hit the press, the vice president and his family were coming out for this fossil dig. So the leak did not come from us. And so that day, as they're working, we've got 15, 18, whatever the number of Secret Service agents, which is all of them standing there, uh, that are doing the first go around to decide where the snipers or anti-snipers or whatever you want to call them are setting up. Beautiful day on the 3rd. The 4th rained an inch that night, and it was muddy as hell in that. And to the point where those slippery footprints, one's mine, one's Clint, one's a FBI agent trying to get up that slope, which was literally impossible to get up there. And so, and coming off the main road in Medora, it's what, 3.5 miles or so over to a half-mile two-track. And we just barely made it out there. And we thought, the more traffic on this road is the vice president and their whole entourage is going to have a hard time. So talked with Nathan Anderson. He talked with the governor's office. Pretty soon, we got the county, the road grader somehow made it all the way through there. And he was a sight for sore eyes. And then he came into the site and he's pushing, as he's digging up dry material, pushing in front of him. But you see that dip that he's coming up. And what happened is he gets into the dip, starts to back out, and he immediately goes to where we've got that set up, that the tent, that awning, and starts to roll backwards into that. And which he would just had a hell of a time getting out of there once he got in. Then he comes out the other way and damn near goes over. And there he could have easily been killed. And so that was it with him. He said, "I'm done. I just can't get up there." So then we had these two idiots in a skid steer show up, and instead of picking up dry material and dropping it in front of them, they decided to Steve McQueen it or whatever, and they got off on the side, which was like the worst place to be, and they got stuck. And the snipers there thought it was pretty funny from the Wilson Police Department. So there they are stuck, and we had Greg Hessel, State Senator Greg Hessel, was with us watching all this, and he's like, the sun would have to come out right now, the wind, and this. When he left, he's like, "There's no way this is going to work." So then we decided, you know what? Well, and you can see where the paleo crew is over there. They're standing right where we need to get to. So it's not that far, but it was impossible in that mud. And so we decided to build our own two-track. And you think, when you look at it, you don't think that's that bad, but you're standing, you can hardly stand just on your own. But when you're trying to shovel, get down an inch and throw that gunk to the side, it was really a pain. But got this picture. We were up over that ledge, which was the worst part. Sent it to Kessel, and I said, "Hey, we got this." And I don't know, 2 minutes later, I get a response. "I'm on my way." And thank God he brings well, in the meantime, then when we're waiting for him, I'll just wait for that to come back up, I guess. But while we're waiting for him, we're digging a ditch. Clint's got a ditch thing going, trying to drain. And then Kathy and Jeff are throwing dry material on. I'm thinking, God, if we had like 2-3 days, we could have done that ourselves. But luckily, they came with one skid steer, the one on the left that actually has a shaker platform. I've never seen that before. But you could scoop up dry material and then just kind of sieve it across. And then the other one, grabbed it. It took him 2 seconds because these are Greg's boys. They knew what the hell they were doing. So they grabbed the other one that damn near rolled. If you can roll a skid steer, I thought that would be interesting. I didn't know what that low center of gravity. But anyway, and they made a beautiful platform. And the snipers above there. So we saw 6 sniper teams. And so there were 12 at least. This, by the way, is our picture that we got with JD and Usha, and then the FBI had to block out our pictures for whatever reason. But Actually, the first thing you have to do is turn your camera off, your phone off, I mean, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll sneak in. And Clint's like, I think they got devices they can tell. So we got no pictures, of course, but then they offered to have a picture taken with us. One of the FBI agents took it, and we never got the camera. Clint says that we never got it. I don't know, but when they did leave, they were gone. I turned mine on right away and took a couple of pictures. And up on the butte there to the left, you can see two snipers standing there. On the far right, on that little butte, you can see there are two. And then there's a car about a third of the way over from the right side, and there's two or three snipers over there. And well, these are, and I can't remember if these were the paired ones. I guess they were, at least two of them were. But anyway, they came back. They were several of them were full mud, and their gun cases were mud. I mean, it was really slippery for them. And then you can see as they're finishing up. So um, anyway, that's a stopping point. Sorry, I went a little bit over. And then I'll pick up in May, whenever whoever wants to hear more. I got some even better stories that I could bring at that time. So that's
Taking questions?
sure.
Um, Noticing as you put that student list, your student helpers on your whole project on there. You started out with a UND student, then they were followed by 4 NDSU students.
Yeah.
Kind of looked like a course direction.
Yeah. We got really desperate. That's what happened. We got desperate. Yeah. Well, and then we hired you full time to correct all of that. So no, we really had a great group of students, and it didn't matter where they came from. And then Fred was saying on a gas study, which he needs to talk at, enough times gone by, people forget that. But I point to that as one of these important studies where we went around and took, again, the Water Commission, took all their wells, which in doing so, we went out and looked for gas, looked for methane using detectors. But we also did the inventory, because I think we started with 10,000 wells and there were 5,000, 5,500 or something. I mean, so a lot of wells had just been damaged or were gone, or maybe had gotten reclaimed. Because I think, Bob, that was, maybe you were still there when we started that project. But um, I'm like, damn, we're going to send the Water Commission a bill for doing their inventory for them. But what was interesting about that, so we had an oil company lined up, and then the price of gas dropped and the oil company bailed out, the oil and gas company. And I said, hey, let's do this, because it doesn't matter if it's economic now or economic 20 years from now, they're going to be good data. And what came out of that was you didn't hear a word about fracking in North Dakota, because anybody that started to say, hey, wait a minute, we've got all this gas showing up. We already showed that there was natural gas throughout the state, the shallow groundwater system. And so we never had the problem that they had in Ohio and other places. So, and Fred had pictures of lighting a faucet, in out of Hillsboro or somewhere or that was McHenry, okay, which we knew about historically. They knew that area. They talked about glacial gas there. We knew there was enough organics, and we saw that at Max Bass. The Fox Hills there flowed on us, and I've got pictures of bubbling gas coming out of the Fox Hills in Bottineau County. So
Well, you could just blame that on Milt, because if Milt wouldn't have hired me as a summer tech, I never would have had the knowledge of that observational network in the first place. So,
I went through therapy, and I learned to forgive Milt for that. So okay, well, thank you.